Hello and welcome to Tuesday Newsday, your #1 resource for the entire week's worth of VR news. I can't believe it, guys. The YouTube stars aligned, and looks like Tuesday Newsday is actually on a Tuesday. Perfect too, because some of the biggest news that has ever dropped for VR, including but not limited to the Oculus Quest getting its second table tennis game this week. That's right, you heard it here first. This week's news may be overwhelming, but I urge you to hold onto your wrist straps because this 4-year-old PSVR game coming to the Quest is going to change the world. I'm just kidding. Let's get right into the news, the real news. I have heard from some people that the Quest is back in stock in some regions, or at least it's been popping in and out of stock. So if you're in the market for one, just stay looking because you may get lucky, as I know a few people have. Stress Level Zero's Boneworks received a pretty large update. This did happen last week, but I'm coming back to it now because I personally really enjoy Boneworks, and it's turned into my favorite VR game mechanically. And I do think it's a must-try for VR enthusiasts. Now, almost everyone I know has already played it, but I do know there's a decent group of people that either bought the game and could never finish it due to time constraints, or never bothered to get the game because of the lack of the checkpoint system in the campaign. I can understand how not having any save system within your campaign levels definitely can hurt the playability of the game. This is especially understandable as during your first playthrough of Boneworks, some levels can easily take 30 to 45 minutes, and previously you either had to commit to finishing the whole level, or you had to stop in the middle and restart the entire thing. So if that was holding you back before, then come on back and give it another try, because it's got its own save system now and you could take your time. Also in the update is a better system for climbing. I tried to speedrun the game a few times and actually getting thrown around in circles during the giant climbing section, and you know what part of the game honestly didn't feel great for either my speedrun time or my stomach. But this is now mostly fixed with the update. The whole climbing system has been improved. One last cool update for Boneworks. If you have the Oculus Store version of the game, then you'll get early access to a new environment that if you've been in VR for a long time, you'll recognize. This is the Tuscany demo from 2013, a demo created by the Oculus team to show off the original DK1 at various trade shows. And that's why the Tuscany demo is on the Oculus Store version only at the moment. SLZ did say that the environment will come to the Steam version closer to the large March update that's on its way. So I'm a big esports fan. I watch my fair share of games within ESL, I'm a decently consistent watcher of the Overwatch League, and I'm seriously waiting for the right game to come out to really help VR esports take off. Here's the thing, as much as it seems like I'm a geek that plays VR games and makes videos all day, sports and physical activity have always been a part of my life. Track, football, and the other football, you name it. And I genuinely enjoy the competition around athletics. I also, however, love clicking heads in various games and being competitive there. I've always imagined that VR at some point can combine the two. Imagine if physical prowess mixed with the skill required to master a game met in the middle. We're kind of already there with games like Echo Arena and Combat, certainly requiring training physically and a ton of full body muscle memory. It became very apparent to me while I was playing Echo during a tournament that there is huge potential for extremely high ceiling in VR competitive games, but really no game or medium has managed to take advantage of that yet. That's probably due to a lot of fundamental problems that only time or the right game can take care of, like being a game that's fun to watch. Imagine watching a professional VR esports game in VR like you're at a sports stadium, which if you haven't watched esports live at a stadium, I would highly recommend it. Or imagine a really good class-based shooter that not only relies on game sense and game mechanics, but actual body mechanics that you'll have to physically train to reach that next level. Are you a scout or flanker style character? Well, you're gonna have to physically train your body to become more agile if you want to reach that next level of competitive play. I mean, the possibilities are endless, and I think some really interesting genres of games will come to life in the future just based off the crazy things you could do within VR that weren't possible before. But back on things that I think need to happen. Full body tracking likely needs to become a standard for a game like this. At this point, that's a huge limiting factor for people, as some people's headsets aren't even compatible with any reliable form of full body tracking. But again, that's why I said it would need to become a standard in the box moving forward. If you want a decent idea of what a next generation VR esport could look like, take a look at Exodus Burst. Burned, apparently the very first active esport. This is the first game to be used in the so-called active esports arena, and its primary focus is making a game fun to watch in person and on stream, difficult to master, and physically involving. Also, one really cool thing is that the whole system uses full body tracking as a major component of the game. Now look, I don't necessarily think that this is the game that will kick off VR esports in the vision that I have for it, but it's only the first game developed for usage in the arena, and I could see massive potential. Quote, active gaming with your body as the controller, where you sometimes work together and then to end up competing against each other to keep the highest score. That's how you best describe Exodus Burned, the official first active esport. At the moment, we're talking with several European top football clubs to open similar arenas. In addition, there's a desire to organize an Exodus Burned league and tournaments among these clubs, end quote. So some big orgs are interested in endorsing and pushing this style of arenas and games forward, and that's great. I'm a firm believer that once a good enough option for a competitively viable game is out there, not only will streaming and content creation world open up massively to VR, but also maybe people will actually want to watch VR esports, and viewers turn into players, and before you know it, the whole thing snowballs into more people in VR playing good VR games and watching talented athletes compete. It's all just good stuff, and it just builds the community. And now it's time for a meme break! And this is where I'd put my Valve index, if I had one. Look, I know there are a lot of people wanting indexes right now, and unfortunately Valve has confirmed that the virus is affecting their production. But when it does come back into stock and you're asking your family to go help you buy it, all you gotta do is pull this up and you're good to go.
I am once again asking for your financial support.
Now back to the news. Some cool stats shown recently show that more than 100 VR games have broken the $1 million mark in terms of revenue, almost half of that being from the past year. You can see this graph the kind of growth that software sales has had over the past even 6 months. Developing a big VR game is honestly pretty scary, as while it's a far less crowded platform than typical flat games, usually the potential to sell massive amounts of copies is pretty low. This is a lot of the reason why we see smaller, cheaper games coming out for VR. It makes sense to sell a shorter $30 game than a multi-million-dollar full-fledged $60 game that has the potential to completely flop, or in a slightly less dire situation, not sell enough copies to recoup the development costs. Well, I think both the sell numbers recently as well as the jump in quality of games show that this old thought process is on its way out. Obviously, VR games don't make as much or sell as many copies as flat games on average, but these numbers are proving to a lot of developers and publishers out there that VR games definitely can be financially viable. This certainly hasn't always been the case, so seeing these kinds of growth curves really makes the coming future of VR games look really good. So I don't talk about PlayStation VR all that much on this channel, but Sony getting controllers similar to the Knuckles has definitely piqued my interest. I personally wasn't an early adopter of PSVR, as I've always been on the PC side, and not saying anything bad about Sony's offerings. I'm just simply saying I'm not a console peasant. Oh, what was that? That was that was weird. Joking, of course, don't worry. What I was saying is that I just haven't even owned a console in the past few years. Between having PC VR to occupy me and being slightly frustrated at Sony's aggressive exclusive strategy, it's just never been a prime focus for me. But let's be real here. If we're talking about important things in the VR space, I seriously can't ignore the massive effect PlayStation VR has had on the industry. As much as I get frustrated over the exclusivity thing for certain games like Firewall Zero Hour, just look at where the sales are at. I almost can't blame a developer for wanting to release on Sony's platform, but there is a major problem, and it's likely the reason why I don't give PSVR the attention it deserves. Developing a game for PC VR, PSVR, and Quest to top it all off at the same time isn't exactly easy. A game made for PlayStation has its own unique challenges that fundamentally change the way a game is designed and plays. One kind of small one is, for example, how the PlayStation camera works for tracking. You effectively only have 200 degrees or so of tracking range, because if you turn around, then your body occludes the little tracking balls. This really isn't that big of a deal, as early VR games especially almost always had the option of front-facing or 360 degrees of tracking, but I think the biggest problem here is that Sony themselves stated that the PSVR far exceeded their expectations. The PlayStation 4 is more limited in different ways between the Quest and, a PC VR setup. The horsepower just isn't there between a PS4 versus a PC, and the tracking just isn't there between a Quest and PSVR. Really, Sony just didn't expect the PlayStation VR to lead software and hardware sales for the entire entire industry. It uses some pretty old tech that seems cobbled together to just make VR work. The Move controllers are more than a decade old, yet hold up pretty well. But it looks like a new patent from Sony shows off a total refresh of the controllers that feature index-like finger tracking, using sensors along the grip to tell if your fingers are open or closed. Also, it looks like there's an analog stick, which is a massive improvement over standard Move controllers. Also, no tracking ball. Could this mean that the next iteration of PSVR moves away from illumination-based tracking? No idea. This is just a patent though, so who knows if we'll ever see anything come out of it. I'm hopeful though, because the closer that PSVR gets to PC VR, maybe the more that we all get to share our game libraries. All of those amazing PlayStation VR devs could also release for PC, making Sony and everybody more money and making better games. And also all the good games that come out for PC could maybe come out for PSVR. Really, my idea is just having a more open platform for everything because we all benefit. Well, anyways, that's most of the week's news. Stop by Twitch today. I'll be streaming there and you could hang out and we'll have a good time. The exact schedule notifications are in my Discord. Also, thank you to all of my Patreon supporters, especially my Omegas like Ninja, Walter, Exit, and Very Evil Shadow. I really couldn't be doing any of this without you. Don't forget to like this video if you loved it, subscribe if you want more of this, and hit that freaking bell if you just can't live without it. Much love, Thrill out.